Hi, everyone, and welcome to a Wing seminar at Aerodynamic. Today, we're going to talk about how to fly the San Francisco Bay Tour. I'm here with Chris, and he's going to help me present today. We're doing this together. And just for housekeeping, this is how you're going to get the Wings credit. Everyone just write down this link, take a screenshot, tinyurl.com/BayTourWings. The way to get Wings credit is you create an account on FAAsafety.gov. Make sure that you note down what your email address is. And then when you go to this link, it's going to ask you your first name, last name, the email address that you use for your FAA safety account. And it's going to ask you 2 secret words. The first secret word will be halfway through the presentation. The second will be at the end of the presentation before we answer Q&A. And you will also be asked if you would like to join an email listserv. That way, we will continue staying in contact with you, send you handouts, other future events. And then the last question will be if you have any comments, feedback about the event. I encourage everyone to earn the Wings credit. You can apply your Wings credit toward the flight review. In general, to stay current, you need a flight review every 24 calendar months. So this is one way you can get your Wings credit. And let's get started. So everyone online, put in the chat box, what are you most interested about when we talk about the Bay Tour? Like, what are some things that you would love to be able to see? What are something that you think will be amazing and fun? And if you've already done a Bay Tour, put it on the chat box. I've already done a Bay Tour. This is what I'd love to see. This is what I want to be able to learn today. Feel free to engage. These are some of the most beautiful sites that I've seen on my Bay Tour. Chris and I together have done hundreds of Bay Tour with different students, with lots of different pilots. I love flying towards San Francisco City, watching the city comes into view. Sometimes there's fog that goes over. Sometimes there are clouds, seeing the Golden Gate Bridge coming into view. I'd like to fly down the coastline, watch the waves washed into the shorelines. I love watching the jets fly over San Francisco International, San Jose International, and watching all the jets come in and land. I love flying in circles around Alcatraz Island. It's a beautiful, beautiful sight. Thanks everyone for participating. Yeah, want to fly out of town guesses. That's a great reason, right? Fire up the chat. Using transition routes, we'll definitely talk about that. Navigating the airspace. Hi, Joseph. Bayshore transition. Not sure how to process. We're going to talk about all of that. The Bay Tour is one of the most spectacular tour that you could do. The views are unmatched anywhere in the world. But there are a few challenges. So put in the chat box if these are some of the challenges that makes you feel intimidated on going on a Bay Tour by yourself, or that you really struggled with the last time you did the Bay Tour. Challenge number 1 that I often hear most people have is how to navigate around these mountainous terrain, mountains, bodies of water. How high do we need to fly so that if something happens to the engine, we could glide back into land? Marine layers and clouds. There are lots of marine layers and clouds that come along in the coastal region. If you don't know how to read the weather, sometimes it'll move into San Francisco, and it can really make your tour like flying in the clouds, right, in the soup. So that's challenge number 1, is terrain, is weather. Challenge number 2 is how do you navigate these interlocking class Bravo, Charlie, Delta airspace? It's overlapping. It can be very overwhelming just looking at it. It's hard to make out what's happening. And challenge number 3, fast, complex radio calls. When you fly the Bay Tour, you're going to be talking with lots of different ATC controllers, changing rapidly. They're going to give you different commands, different requests. So how do you navigate all those fast, complex radio calls? Yes, Bill, yeah, who are you required to contact? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're here, Chris and I, to make this process simple. We're just going to simplify the process, make it feel less overwhelming, makes us feel like this is totally doable. Like you can do it too. Chris, who's sitting next to me, and he'll he'll join in a few minutes. And I are flight instructors at Aerodynamic Aviation. We teach flight students, different levels, and we also teach ground school. For this presentation, we have actually reached out, done our research, talked to ATC. We talked to Lauren, who is at Reed Hillview Tower and Ground. We talked to Josh Murphy and other NorCal TradeCon ATC controllers. And we asked them, how do you prefer us to do this? Like, what is the simplest way for us to navigate Class Bravo airspace, for us to do this bay tour? And what we've discovered is, and I invite you to, throughout this presentation, think of the relationship that we have with ATC as being part of the team. Because when we have conversations with our ATC, it's a dance. Okay? And throughout this presentation, you're going to see that. We're constantly, as pilots and ATC, dancing with each other, working as a team to navigate the airspaces safely, to make everything nice and efficient. And they're very friendly, welcoming. Sometimes new pilots or maybe seasoned pilots see ATC as adversary or maybe intimidating or scary, hard to interact with. And in fact, when we talk to our ATC controllers, they're supremely nice. They're family people. They have family and kids and wives and husband, and they're super nice. They're really helpful. They want to help everyone get where they're going and make sure that it's done really safe. So we're really thankful that they supported us and talked to us and help us out. When it comes to the bay tour, you can think of it as two segments: getting up and going up toward the Golden Gate Bridge, departing on a bay tour, and returning home. Today, we're going to invite you to go on a bay tour with us. You're going to go along our journey, listen to the radio calls, and see how you might interact. Look at the images, the views that you're going to see, and all the frequencies, all the airspaces, and we'll have all these discussions. So at this moment, I'm going to invite Chris to come up and talk about how you're going to do the first segment, departing on a bay tour.
Hi, my name is Chris, and as Kyle was saying, I'm an instructor here at Aerodynamic. When it comes, I'm gonna go ahead and cut just a tad bit. There we go. I'm a lot taller than Tao, unfortunately. When it comes to departing on the bay tour, everyone has the same question: where do I even begin, or how do I even start on when it comes to requesting the bay tour? Do I need to do anything special? Well, the good news is that there's many different ways that you can actually depart and conduct this bay tour. One that we've seen kind of already in the chat is the transition routes. How do we use these VFR transition routes? The other option is going under or around the Bravo airspace. And then of course you can also transition to get up into the North Bay. You can transition through Oakland's Class Charlie as well. So when it comes to the route that Tao and I decided to fly, we actually used a VFR transition route. As we've discovered, that's mostly what people are wanting to do, especially traveling up to be dropped off right in downtown San Francisco and see the pretty views of downtown San Francisco, as well as San Francisco Airport and downtown South San Francisco as well. So we decided to make a full ring around the bay so you can see exactly how much fun this is. You can see that we decided to hang around Golden Gate a little bit, as well as fly around Alcatraz, and of course finish our route through Oakland. So when it comes to actually departing on the bay tour, it's as simple as just requesting the bay tour. So for our purpose here, as starting at Reed Hillview, we can just tune up to ground, and as we're getting ready to taxi, it's as simple as just giving your call sign, letting them know where you are at, and requesting taxi for the bay tour, and of course giving your appropriate ATIS information there as well. Now the good news is that when it comes to the bay tour with us, the default is going to be through transitioning San Jose Class Charlie airspace. Now there's a couple different ways that you can do this. One is by talking to NorCal. The other one we have is something called tower to tower. Now, Tal mentioned at the very beginning how all of our airspaces here in the San Francisco Bay Area are all interlocking, and they overlap each other, they collide with each other, all the way from San Jose to San Francisco International. So one option, as I mentioned, is something called tower to tower, where you can actually stay pretty low. You'll get the same transition through San Jose. And then instead of being handed off to NorCal, you'll actually get handed off to Moffett Tower. And then once again, Moffett will give you to Palo Alto, and then to San Carlos, and then hopefully San Carlos will get you over to San Francisco for one of your transitions. However, the reason that tower to tower may not be the most convenient is, first of all, it keeps you quite low. And when you are a pilot flying, one of the first things we learned is that you always want to be high enough. That way you can always go somewhere if the worst case scenario happens. The other reason you might not want to use tower to tower is because you are not in contact with NorCal, who is going to be a lot of help when requesting some of these transitions, especially when talking about the transitions through on the coastline or going through Pacifica. And you'll also kind of learn later on in our seminar that going through an airport such as San Carlos, which can get incredibly busy, they don't always like to assist when it comes to San Francisco transitions, because they are very no-nonsense controllers and they have their own things that they're trying to deal with involving their own airspace. But for our purposes today, we decided to use going through NorCal instead of our tower to tower. And once again, our default for Reed Hillview is going to be transitioning through San Jose's Class Charlie. So the call that you are going to get when you're departing from Reed Hillview is they will tell you to remain clear of the Class Charlie until in contact with San Jose Tower on 124.0. You are going to get one of two squawk codes, okay, with the prefix of 53003. All that means is that you are going to be staying local in our area, and they'll actually put it on a digital tape that will actually say tour, or in abbreviated is 2 Echo Romeo, letting all the controlling agencies that you will be talking to, letting them know that you are going to be on a tour. And so everyone that you're talking to already knows what your intentions are, which makes your radio communication a lot less stressful. Because I don't know if you guys have ever been there, but I've definitely been in that situation. I'm wondering, does this controller know what I was requesting before? And according to our research, the answer is yes. The controllers are always talking to each other and know exactly what we're looking for. So after you depart Reed Hillview, they're of course going to give you that frequency change, which is contact San Jose Tower 124.0. And at that point, you will go ahead and move over to San Jose. So when you contact San Jose, for some of the newer pilots out there, you want to go ahead and let them know that you have just departed. Okay, you want to give them your current altitude and the altitude you are climbing to. I usually, when I'm transitioning San Jose, I like to give them 1,500 or 1,500. And at that point, they're going to come back and tell you Skyhawk 12234, San Jose altimeter 29902, cross San Jose Airport midfield at 1,500, 2,000, or 2,500. They're going to give you an altitude restriction on how they want you to transition over the middle of the field. And for some of our more veteran pilots or people who have just gotten their private pilot or beyond, know that the safest place of an airport is directly over, which is why they transition you that way. So this is one of the views you're going to see transitioning over San Jose. It is very pretty and it is a lot of fun, especially because for the newer pilots that haven't really gotten to see some of these bigger international airports, it is incredibly breathtaking to see something like this, especially when you get to be flying over when a Southwest jet is departing, or you might see Alaska Airlines coming into land as well. It is really, really neat, especially if you're a huge aviation nerd, not just with flying, but with the aircraft that you're going to see as well. So now that you have flown over San Jose midfield, it is time to start making your calls to NorCal. So we found out that when you're transitioning over to San Jose, they're going to give you a heading restriction. They'll tell you Skyhawk 12234, fly a heading of 270 and contact NorCal on 120.1. This is where you're going to be able to repeat back those instructions, finishing with your call sign to let them know you're done talking, and that's when you can go ahead and change your frequencies and now check in with your first NorCal controller. Okay. At this point, if you are at 1,500 feet, they haven't given you an altitude restriction as you have already crossed over San Jose. We recommend at least climbing to 2,500. One, because it keeps you out of the rest of the airspaces such as Moffett and Palo Alto and San Carlos, but it also keeps you out of the other way, and it makes NorCal's job a little bit easier, especially when you're not going to be going through airspace. Now, if you decide that you do want to stay low because the views are quite pretty, since you are in two-way radio communication with NorCal, you absolutely can go through all those different Delta airspaces. You can absolutely do that. A lot of people start to get nervous and they think that they're not in contact with the actual controlling tower, but because you're in contact with NorCal, you can blow right through those airspaces, and if they need to transition you to another frequency, they're going to do that on their own. Okay? They'll let you know. But like I said, for our purposes, climbing to 2,500 is in my opinion, going to be the safer option. And it's also going to make your tour for the controllers a little bit more simplistic as well. So now you can go ahead and check in with NorCal while giving your altitude. Skyhawk 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, we're at 2,500, and then they'll come back with an updated altimeter setting from San Francisco. All right, Skyhawk 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, your San Francisco altimeter setting, and then they'll give it to you 299 or 2. So at this point, you're going to be pretty much right next to Moffett, and you're going to be able to see things such as Apple Park, which has that awesome spaceship campus. If you guys haven't been there, I highly recommend it, especially if you're a tech fan like me. Okay. And then, of course, you're also going to be seeing stunning views such as Moffett that has a brand new redone runway, and it is absolutely incredible to see from the air, especially when you see some of the military jets that are taking off from there. It can be quite stunning to see. Now, as you start to get past Moffett, you are going to get handed off once again. As Tal was saying, it gets very busy and very fast, right? So after you get past Moffett, their next controlling agency is on 135.65. You'll be advised to switch. And so you'll go ahead and tune in that frequency after reading back your call, and you'll go ahead and check in. Okay, once again, very important, you want to check in with your current altitude, okay? They absolutely love it when you're giving your altitude. One, because it allows them to make sure that they're receiving the correct altitude. And also, it's a verification on yourself to make sure that you're at the altitude that you want it to be, right? Once again, they're going to give you the updated San Francisco altimeter setting. That way they can make sure and provide the ultimate separation between you and all the other aircraft that are either going to be coming in and out of these Delta airports or doing bay tours themselves. It is not uncommon to see the bay tours on these routes. So you're going to see things such as Stanford campus, okay, which is absolutely stunning. You're also going to see other pretty views along the route as well, such as you'll be able to see Palo Alto. You'll be able to see the pretty golf course that sits next to Palo Alto's airspace. And then you're also going to start getting some really cool pictures of downtown Redwood City and, of course, the San Mateo Bridge. All righty. So the next controlling agencies, you guessed it, it happens real fast, is on 135.1. Now, I did see somewhere in the chat that you guys are very interested in learning how to use these VFR transition routes. Well, 135.1 is going to be your time to start thinking, or actually you should already have it ready, but to request what transition you would like to use, okay? So when it comes to these transitions, we have 3 VFR transitions that you can use. One is going to be the Bayshore transition, arguably one of the most popular. The Bayshore transition, it was going to take you through places such as San Francisco Airport and drop you off right in downtown San Francisco over the city. You also have the coastline transition, which we're going to talk about in a moment, and the Pacifica transition, which is kind of going to give you the best of both worlds in terms of the Bayshore and coastline. So we have a flyway chart that some of you guys have mentioned. The flyway chart is amazing when conducting the Bay Tour. So the VFR transition routes are going to be labeled, as you can see here with those red arrows. The Bayshore transition, using those red arrows that you see on the screen, is going to take you straight next to San Francisco along Highway 101. And then, of course, you're going to get dropped off right over the farmer's market, which is going to lead you straight into downtown San Francisco, which is exactly what Tal and I used when we decided to go and record our track log for our seminar today. Now, another popular transition that I see a lot is using the Pacifica VFR transition. The VFR transition for Pacifica is really cool because it still will take you straight next to San Francisco Airport, but you'll be able to keep going through the peninsula over to the coast, which if you're like me, I love coastal flying. If you ever train with me, you know that we go out to the coast a lot to do our maneuvers, especially when the weather gets really pretty, to keep our training interesting. And flying along the coast, along the peninsula is no different. It is absolutely stunning. This route will drop you right off on the other side of Golden Gate Bridge, which is an incredible view once you see it. The last route that we kind of talked about was the coastline transition. The coastline transition will take you pretty much near San Carlos, and to get on that coastline transition, you'll actually fly from San Carlos over Crystal Springs. You'll get to Half Moon Bay, which is where you will once again request that coastline transition, and that will take you straight up the coast, intersecting with that Pacifica transition, and once again drop you off on the other side of Golden Gate Bridge. So, like I said, for our purposes today, Tal and I requested the Bayshore transition. So how that's going to sound is when you check in with NorCal on 135.1, something as simple as NorCal Skyhawk 12234 at 2500 requesting the Bayshore transition. Most likely the response you're going to get back after you finally get your by listening to all those airliners is Skyhawk 12234, San Francisco altimeter 29902. We have your request. Okay. At this point, it is important to understand you are still not cleared into San Francisco Class Bravo. Just a review for all the pilots that are here. In order to get cleared into San Francisco Class Bravo, you must hear those magic words, cleared into the Bravo. If you do not hear that, it does not matter what they say. You are not allowed and not permitted to enter into that airspace. Okay? Two-way radio communication is just not enough in this case. So at this point, you're going to be right next to San Carlos. Okay? San Carlos Airport, once again, has a lot of no-nonsense, very fast-talking controllers, okay, which is why, once again, we do request that you talk with NorCal to make your life easier. There's been lots of moments where I have tried a tower-to-tower transition when conducting these bay tours, and San Carlos doesn't even want to deal with it, and they'll tell you to get out of their airspace, and they want you going somewhere else. So talking to NorCal makes it a little bit more simple. As fun as San Carlos can be. Okay, so now it's time for them to give you those magic words, and this is where they're going to talk incredibly fast, and it's going to sound something like, Skyhawk 12234, you are cleared into San Francisco Class Bravo airspace at or below 2000, remain south and west of Highway 101, contact San Francisco Tower on 120.5, good luck. And they're going to leave you. Okay, at that point, that is when you have to read back all their instructions, and they have said a lot, and this is about the time when people start to feel a little bit more intimidated when it comes to actually entering into that airspace because they want a lot from you. So we break it down, okay, and this is why writing things down as you're flying and creating your own shorthand becomes incredibly important. Okay, so the response. We are cleared into San Francisco Class Bravo airspace at or below 2000, remaining south and west of Highway 101. Contact San Francisco Tower 120.5, Skyhawk 12234. Once again, with finishing with your call sign at the end, letting them know you are done transmitting and talking so they can move on to other controllers. Okay, so now that we have said our magic words, we are now cleared into the Bravo. Okay. We do not have to contact San Francisco beforehand, but it is wise to try to get your radio call before you enter, but it is not required. You're already cleared into that magical Bravo airspace that everyone gets a little bit intimidated by. So you make your contact on San Francisco Tower, Skyhawk 12234, 2000, just passing through is kind of how I like to say it. It gives them a little bit of humor. Okay. They already know what you're doing. They know you're transitioning through the airspace. So they'll reply back, Skyhawk 12234, San Francisco altimeter 29902, remain south and west of Highway 101. Now, this is where people start to get a little confused because they're giving you two compass directions and they're telling you to remain south and west of the 101. Well, if you look at our track log, it pretty much follows the 101. We're actually right on the other side, remaining south and west. All that means is they don't want you to fly over it, right? They don't want you to fly north of 101. They don't want you to fly over it. And they also want you to stay on the west side. Back when I was conducting these bay tours for the first time, I always got really confused on what they meant by south and west of 101. It wasn't until I've actually talked to a controller that it was explained to me. Because I was like, why don't they just stay west of 101? Well, because that direction doesn't always make sense, especially because 101 does curve a little bit. So they're wanting you to, once again, stay to the south, stay to the west of 101. That'll keep you out of the way of their arrivals. So in this, now you're going to see some very pretty views, such as San Francisco International Airport. If anyone knows me, I am a huge fan of the Southwest. I don't know why, one of my dream airlines. And I was very fortunate this time as we were making our transitions, we got to see Southwest lining up and wait, which is really, really cool. You're also going to be passing over downtown San Bruno and downtown South San Francisco. Which once again, incredibly stunning views, especially with the industrial city sign that hangs out on that hill. Okay. So after you're making these transitions, it is now time for us to exit the Bravo and start enjoying our tour. Now, getting into the Bravo wasn't as intimidating as you guys thought. It was just that one lengthy radio call. But now all of y'all know exactly what to say and know exactly what to expect. And doing some of these bay tours, talking to the controllers, learning what to expect and understanding what is going to happen is going to be key in making your life less stressful and making NorCal's job really simple, especially when giving Bravo clearances. So it's probably you guys are here, right? So they're going to tell you, Skyhawk 12234, leaving San Francisco Bravo airspace in 1 mile, contact approach on 135.1, which was actually the frequency that we got our initial Bravo clearance from. So at this point, we will go ahead and contact approach by giving our call sign as well. So NorCal, Skyhawk 12234 at your given altitude, okay? So usually they're gonna say something kind of funny if they're not too busy. Skyhawk 12234, welcome back, remain north of the Bay Bridge, okay? San Francisco altimeter 29902. Now, when they say remain north of the Bay Bridge, it literally means exactly what it means. Just stay north of it. If you look at a VFR sectional chart, you will see that the class Charlie for Oakland actually snakes past that bridge. But remember, you are already in contact with NorCal. And as long as you're staying north of that Bay Bridge, you can go in and out of that airspace at will, right? You are already in two-way radio communication. You have your squawk code. You are allowed to move back and forth between that airspace to meet the needs and wants of your bay tour. Alrighty, so once again, repeating back the instruction is very important. This is the last time that you will be engaging in a conversation before you go back. Most of the time, they're going to give you traffic alerts if the Bay Area is crowded. But other than that, this might be the last time that you actually really need to talk to them. So remaining north of the Bay Bridge, altimeter 29902, once again, finishing with your call sign to let them know that you are now done transmitting. All right, so you've made it, okay? You are now in San Francisco Bay. You can finally conduct your bay tour after all that mess snaking up the peninsula, okay? This is where you can actually relax, start having fun, maybe showing off a little bit to your passengers about the Golden Gate Bridge and Alcatraz, at least showing exactly where you've been living, or if you're not from here, exploring the city from the air. So you get to see pretty views such as San Francisco, which is where you're going to get dropped off after doing this amazing transition, Golden Gate Bridge, and of course, Alcatraz. Now, the question that we usually get as instructors, especially from newer pilots when they're conducting these bay tours, is now that I'm over the bay, how high or how low can I actually fly to these landmarks? Okay, and this is where I'm going to kind of bring you guys back to your basic training. pre-check ride where we're going to go ahead and start talking about how low can you actually get when it comes to conducting these. Now, for some of you that are aviation super nerds, you might have your favorite regulations. Okay. For example, one of my favorite regulations is 91-103, which is our pre-flight action. And I also have 91-119, which is also our minimum safe altitudes. Okay. So just to review, remember the reg. This is our rules. Except when necessary for takeoff or landing, no person may operate an aircraft below the following altitudes. So let's start with anywhere. An altitude allowing, if a power unit fails, an emergency landing can be made without undue hazard to persons or property on the surface. Okay, so this goes for no matter where you are. Okay, meaning flying 2 feet off the ground, probably not the best idea, because if your power unit fails, you really don't got much time to do anything about it. Okay, over a congested area. Okay, this would be places such as downtown San Francisco. Okay. Over any congested area, city, town, or settlement, or over an open air assembly of persons, meaning such as a concert venue, okay? An altitude of 1,000 feet above the highest obstacle, okay? The highest obstacle, not the event itself, but the highest obstacle. This one gets overlooked more times than I can count. And it's within a horizontal radius of 2,000 feet. Okay. Once again, another aspect of this rule that gets overlooked quite a bit. Okay. So 2,000 feet horizontal and 1,000 feet above the highest obstacle, which is why we never fly directly over Salesforce Tower when we're flying over downtown San Francisco, because we're not going to be able to get that high without staying out of the Bravo. Okay. And then, of course, other than congested areas, this is when you are going to be over the San Francisco Bay waters, maybe circling Alcatraz or Golden Gate, an altitude of at least 500 feet above the surface, except over open water, or sparsely populated areas. In those cases, the aircraft may not be operated closer than 500 feet to any person, vessel, or structure. Okay. When it comes to flying over San Francisco Bay, it is covered, especially on pretty days. I'm not even kidding, covered in boats, sailboats, cargo ships, seaplanes, helicopters. We have Golden Gate and Alcatraz. There's all kinds of different things you are going to discover that are hanging out on the water before you actually, while you're flying over San Francisco Bay. So the best altitude to meet all these requirements and not even get questioned whether or not you are flying high enough is going to be an altitude of 2,500. Okay, 2,500 is going to be perfect because it is going to keep you out of the Bravo airspace. It is going to keep you high enough in case your power unit fails, you can glide all over the place, such as, for example, Golden Gate Park or Golden Gate. I forgot the actual name of the beachfront that's sitting right there, but there is a great grass strip that is there, perfect for landing a small airplane. You can, Presidio, thank you, Tal. And then of course, Angel Island has a bunch of options as well, of course, as Sausalito. And that way you're not having to land in the actual water. It also makes for really, really good pictures, and it keeps you out of the way from everyone else that is conducting the day tour. NorCal can see you no problem. And once again, it is going to keep you out of a lot of different trouble, and no one's going to question if you were flying too low. So we talked about at the very beginning how there's some alternate departures that you can get to get up to the North Bay. One of them is going to be transitioning through Oakland, which I mentioned at the very beginning. Oakland is a Class Charlie, may feel less intimidating for some people. And so you can easily ask for that transition from either Reed Hillview or San Jose, or if you're taking off out of Livermore. Transitioning through San Jose airspace is as simple as just asking for it. So at the very beginning, when you're requesting the bay tour, just throw in the transition you want. Reed Hillview ground, Skyhawk 12234 at Aerodynamic requesting taxi for the bay tour, Oakland transition with ATIS information and whatever we get. And so you can also do this if you want some kind of weird transition, like maybe that you're wanting to fly to Livermore first for whatever reason, and then transition over to Oakland. You can give your route of flight here on the initial contact to ground, because once again, ATC is communicating your intentions to every other controller that you are going to be talking to, making your life a lot easier. That way you're not having to question whether or not the next controller knows exactly what you are going to be doing. All right, so you have now made it to our first secret word, which is going to be chocolate. So go ahead and notate this, take a picture, screenshot. This is our first secret word, and this is how you are going to be able to obtain your wings credit at the end of our presentation today. That's why we're all here. We all like to collect those credits. I know I do. Still need to figure out if I get the credit for this one, but I guess we'll find out. Okay. Now it is time to come back home. You have now successfully completed your bay tour. You've done 20,000 laps around Alcatraz. Now it's time to think about, all right, had my fun, time to come home. And at this point, I would like to invite Tao back up to talk about our return journey back to Reed Hillview.
Hi, everyone, and there we go. It's time to come home. And I've seen lots of people in the chat box asking, well, what if you don't get Class Bravo transition? What would you do? So I'm going to show you 2 different ways to come back home, and hopefully that will answer this question. Option 1 to come back home is you can return via East Bay around Oakland, and here's how you might do it. As Chris was saying, you've been circling around Alcatraz Island, you've been checking out Sausalito, Golden Gate Bridge, taking videos, pictures of all these beautiful views, San Francisco City. Now you are in this bay here on top in the north. You're with NorCal 135.1. You're going to say NorCal, start off 1, 2, 3, 4. We finished the bay tour, plain English. We just finished the bay tour, request Oakland transition back into Reed Hillview. NorCal on 135.1 will say Skyhawk 1, 2, 3, 4. Altimeter setting is whatever setting. Stay north of the Bay Bridge. What that means is there's a bridge called the Bay Bridge that connects San Francisco with Oakland. You just want to stay north of it. Keep the bridge on your right side as you're going East Bay. Stay north of the bridge. Remain clear of Class Bravo. Direct to the Coliseum at or above 2,500 feet and contact Oakland Tower 118.3. Some of you might be, where's the Coliseum? How do I get there? Oakland Coliseum is a stadium that's really near Oakland. So what I like to do, if I know I'm going to go through the East Bay via the Oakland transition back, is I'm going to put these fixed on in my GPS before I even take off. So I would put Oakland. And whenever I hear them say, fly direct to the Coliseum, I just press direct enter toward Kilo Oscar Alpha Kilo. I'm not going to land at Oakland, but that's going to get me going in the direction toward the Coliseum. The Coliseum is this big stadium that's circular, kind of like what you would think of the Roman Coliseum. Also, it's the symbol on your sectional if you fly with ForeFlight or if you fly with your paper chart. This little symbol here, that's the Coliseum. But when you get close to Oakland and you switch to tower, you're going to say Oakland Tower, Skyhawk 1, 2, 3, 4, level 2,500. At this point, you're going to be at 2,500. I'll explain why this altitude in a minute. And Oakland Tower will come back and say altimeter setting, fly direct to one of these 4 fixed. Most of the time, when I've done the Bay tour, Oakland Tower will keep you outside Class Charlie. Sometimes they'll allow you to enter, but most of the time, they'll try to keep you out of Class Charlie. That way they can coordinate arrivals and departures. So they might tell you to fly direct to one of these 4 fixed. Again, this is something that I would do ahead of time. Before I even take off, I would put these fixes in my GPS. In case they tell me to fly direct to one of them, I already have it loaded and I can press direct enter. The 4 fixes that they might tell you is Oakland Temple, Lake Chabot, 3 Crosses, or Cal State University. Once you arrive there and you get close, they'll switch to your NorCal and they'll say contact NorCal 125.35. Here are the 4 fixes on your sectional, and this is an image from VFR Flyway. The first fix is the Mormon Temple. It's at the edge of Class Charlie. The second fix is the Lake Chabot. It's Abilene, Oakland Airport, and also at the edge of Charlie. Then we have the 3 crosses where the highways intersect in Cal State universities. These are visual checkpoints, which mean they're features that are really obvious from the sky that you can identify easily. But if you're unfamiliar with all these places, just put in your GPS and press direct enter, and that's going to help you go directly there. But let's take a look, because they should be visual, easy to identify. The first one is Mormon Temple, VPMOR. The Mormon Temple looks like a white castle from the sky. It's giant, it's big, and it's glorious. And it's the edge of Class Charlie. The next one is Lake Chabot. Lake Chabot looks like a letter V for me from the sky. You're just going to fly toward this lake that's shaped like a letter V. Also, the GPS fix VPCBT, Charlie Bravo Tango. Another location Oakland Tower I tell you to fly toward is 3 crosses. 3 crosses are where the highways intersect, and it makes looks like a trident, looks like a fork. That's where the highway 580 intersects with 238s, and different highways intersects. It's a giant intersection. 3 crosses, VPXES. And the 4th one that they might give you is Cal State University. It's a campus, VPCSH. So you're talking NorCal. NorCal passed you to Oakland, right? NorCal will tell you fly toward the Coliseum, but as soon as you get closer to Oakland, Oakland will tell you to stay clear of Class Charlie by telling you to go direct to one of these 4 fixes. Once you go to one of these 4 fixes, they'll switch you back to NorCal. If you're going to key up 125.35, you can say NorCal, Skyhawk 12234, level 3,500. And NorCal will respond with altimeter setting, and usually they're going to give you a heading to vector for traffic, because anytime that you are flying close to Oakland Airport, there are lots of arrivals and departures that are coming in and out of the airport. So usually at this area, just expect that you're going to get vector around a little bit to stay clear of that. And then as you get closer down south, then they tell you contact Reed Hovey. Let's talk about altitude. As Chris was saying, when you are flying around the Golden Gate Bridge, Alcatraz, you must stay at 2,500 feet because the Bravo airspace right above it is 3,000 feet. At 2,500 feet, you're low enough, have beautiful pictures, and right below Bravo, 500 feet below Bravo, at 3,000, that's where IFR traffic flies, and that's the shelf of Bravo. And also high enough in case you need to glide to land, in case something happened. Now, as you're coming over and going toward East Bay, toward Oakland, the Bravo shelf increased, and now it starts at 4,000. What I like to do is climb up to 3,500 because I know that along East Bay, we're going toward mountainous terrain, and I want to be high. I want to stay high in case if I fly over mountainous terrain and there's updraft or downdraft, it's going to help avoid that turbulence. It's going to give me more terrain clearance, and it's going to feel safer for me. So I would climb 3,500, and I would hold that altitude all the way back to Reed Hillview. Keep it super simple, unless I'm vector otherwise. When I'm close to Reed Hillview, I would say Reed Hillview Tower, Skyhawk 12234, Abilene Mission Peak. Mission Peak is a mountain that's about 10 miles north of Reed Hillview, northwest of Reed Hillview. Abilene Mission Peak at 3,500 and North Landing with ATIS information. And Reed Hillview Tower will say Skyhawk 12234, right downwind, 31 right, if the wind is favoring 31. So you can see throughout this whole tour, you can anticipate exactly what NorCal is going to give you, what they're going to say to you, and exactly what you're going to say back. Like I said before, it's a dance, and it's a dance that is very well rehearsed. There should be no surprises most of the time on your tour. If you are really familiar with what's going to happen, what frequencies, right? That's what our summary handout is going to show you a map with all the frequencies. You can note it down. You can anticipate what the next frequency is so that when NorCal tells you 125.35, you're not like, whoa, what was that number? You know exactly what the next frequency is and where they're likely going to transition you over. You know exactly what all the radio calls are going to be. Anticipate, this is how you stay ahead of the aircraft. And by the way, this route is also what Chris was saying. You could, instead of flying around San Carlos, Palo Alto, up San Francisco, the alternate departure route would be via the Oakland transition. So let's say you're not coming back down via East Bay, but you want to come back up, right? Going around Oakland and then San Francisco and then coming back down again. It's the same route. It's the same frequency, same procedures. Let's talk about the second option, coming home. If you are a lover of the coastlines, if you love seeing the ocean, you can return home via Half Moon Bay. And by the way, for those who've asked earlier, well, what happened if we don't get Class Bravo clearance? What if we can't get through San Francisco? You would do this route. You would come up north and near San Carlos, you're going to ask for Bravo clearance and they'd say, nope, no one is entering today, everyone stay out. Then what you're going to do is cut across the mountain and fly along the coast and remain clear of Class Bravo, and you can still get up to the Golden Gate Bridge, check out all the cool cities, sightseeing. And we're going to walk you through each step. But I'm going to show you the way we return home. Just imagine if you were coming up north, it's the same thing. So let's say you've just done your turns around a point and checking out all these beautiful views and you are ready to come back home. You might ask for the coastline transition. And the coastline transition keeps you along the Pacific coastline. Let's see where that takes you. And here you can imagine that if you're flying up north across San Carlos and you are not able to clear into Class Bravo, you just cut across and you would fly up and down the coastline. That's your alternate option. And sometimes you will not get cleared into Class Bravo. I couldn't get in last time because there were less airliners taking off and departing at San Francisco International Airport at that time. But let's say you finish your bay tour and you want to come back south via the coastline, you would be talking to 135.1 at this point. You're going to say NorCal, Skyhawk 1, 2, 3, 4. We finished the bay tour, plain English, and request a coastline transition back to Reed Hillview. NorCal will come back and say, Skyhawk 1, 2, 3, 4, altimeter setting is this. Own navigation. Own navigation means you can do whatever you want. Remain clear of Class Bravo. And then once you get closer toward Half Moon Bay, they might switch you to the next frequency. So let's break it down. How do you remain clear of Class Bravo if you're coming down the coastline? So let's say we are at the Golden Gate Bridge. Right here, we're in underneath Class Bravo at 3,000 feet. So in general, like we talked about earlier, I like to be at 2,500 feet, just 500 feet below the Class Bravo shelf. Gives me close enough to the views, but low enough so that I'm not in danger of entering Class Bravo accidentally or being too close to IFR airplanes. And then the next Bravo shelf is at 2,100. So at this point, I would start descending to 2,000. 2,000 would give me about 100 feet clearance below the Class Bravo and coming around. One thing to be careful of when you're going this way is there's a little wedge, a little Bravo wedge that comes out, and that shelf starts at 1,600. So I like to just veer off a little bit, and I'll show you more zoom in picture in a second so that I don't enter that little wedge at 1,600. So I'm just holding 2,000 feet flying around. As I'm going more southward, the Class Bravo airspace now increased to 4,000. At this time, I like to climb. Higher altitude, more options, right? So I would climb to 3,500 feet, and now I'm coming close toward Half Moon Bay. Half Moon Bay has a lot of traffic, especially if it's beautiful, clear weather. So you just want to be really careful flying the coastline transition if it's really nice weather, that there are going to be lots of pilots flying up and down the coast. You might also just land at Half Moon Bay. Maybe you make a pit stop there, have lunch there. What's great about Half Moon Bay, and I'll show you in a second, is you can land there, walk into town, have some fish and chips, have some calamari, and fly back home. It's a beautiful airport. Here is a zoom in of that wedge, right? Avoid a wedge, the Bravo airspace is started 1,600 feet. You just veer off a little bit into the water and come back in again after you pass the tiny wedge. Here are some of the views that you might see of the Pacific coastline. You see the mountains, the waves washing in, gorgeous teal colors of the oceans, very beautiful. Here's Half Moon Bay. These are images that we took from the aircraft with our iPhone. If you have fancier camera, this bay tour will be a perfect photography delight for you. Anyway, as you're coming around Half Moon Bay, like I mentioned earlier, you could land at Half Moon Bay. You could taxi at the end of the taxiway and walk straight into town, straight into the restaurants, eat there, walk back, fly back home. A very beautiful flight. Now, let's say that you are done eating your fish and chips and you're ready to come back home. The way that you're going to cross over the mountains and coming back inland, this is what I like to do, and everyone have different ways, is I like to fly toward Crystal Spring because there's Highway 92 over there. Anytime that there's a highway that cuts across a mountain, that's the lowest part of the terrain. It also gives me best place to land at all times. That's my emergency option. Now, I like to fly directly over highways anytime I'm cutting across the mountain. Usually, at least 3,500 feet will keep me clear of the mountain and keep me below Class Bravo airspace, because as we're cutting through this mountain here, Class Bravo airspace starts at 4,000 feet. If you're not familiar with where this highway is, I would put in the GPS fix VPCRY, that's Crystal Spring. And just know that you're gonna fly around Half Moon Bay, and then you're gonna cut across and fly toward Crystal Springs. Across the mountain, above Highway 92 toward Crystal Spring, 3,500 feet. Now you are talking NorCal on 135.65. You can say NorCal, Skyhawk 12234, level 3,500. NorCal, come back with Skyhawk 12234, altimeter setting, and then as you get more southbound, they'll say contact NorCal 120.1. Once you are more southbound, we contact 120.1. You can say NorCal, Skyhawk 12234, level 3,500. Very simple radio calls. You might remember doing flight following in your private level. Any cross-country flight, this is just flight following. NorCal will come back with Skyhawk 12234, altimeter setting, and then as you get closer to San Jose Tower, contact 124.0. Now, this is where it gets interesting. There's one time where NorCal, instead of telling me to contact Tower, they told me to fly direct over Moffett Airport, and then they kept me north of San Jose Airport, and then they'll vector me back into Reed Hillview. So that's one alternate way. Most of the time, though, they will switch you to San Jose Tower so that you can cross midfield. So you're going to say San Jose Tower, Skyhawk 12234, level 3,500 feet. San Jose Tower will come back and say Skyhawk 12234, altimeter setting, cross San Jose Tower or cross San Jose Airport, midfield at a certain altitude. Altitudes could be 1,500, 2,000, or 2,500. Contact Reed Hillview Tower, 119.8. And here you are crossing over San Jose International. As soon as you cross over and you switch to Reed Hillview, you're going to say Reed Hillview Tower, Skyhawk 12234, just past San Jose at whatever altitude you are assigned, inbound landing with ATIS information. Reed Hillview Tower will come back and say Skyhawk 12234, left downwind, 31 left. And here we are coming in, seeing Reed Hillview Airport in sight and getting ready to land. So here's a summary of what we share with you today. And this is what the handout is going to look like. If you want to do this giant loop, it's starting from Reed Hillview all the way up and coming back down to Oakland. You start out Reed Hillview, 119.8, that's the tower. You're gonna pass by San Jose Tower, 124.0. If you ask for the Bay Tour, the default is they're gonna cross you midview over San Jose Airport. So you're crossing over midview, and then you're gonna contact NorCal 120.1. At this point, I like to be at 2,500 feet because that gets me above Moffett airspace and above San Carlos and Palo Alto airspace. So I'm just cruising along 2,500 feet, keeping the 101 on my right side, contacting NorCal 120.1, then contact NorCal 135.65 and 135.1. Once I'm closer to San Carlos, now we're getting ready to ask for a Class Bravo transition. Like Chris says, you can ask for the coastline, Pacifica, or the Bay Shore. If they allows you to enter, then they'll switch you to San Francisco Tower 120.5, and they'll say stay at or below 2,000 feet. At this point, I like to descend 1,900 feet to be at least 100 feet below their restricted altitude in case there's any updraft and downdraft. So I'm just cruising along 1,900 feet, coming up north towards San Francisco. Once we exit Class Bravo airspace, San Francisco Tower will switch us back to NorCal 135.1, and now we're hanging out with NorCal. We're just cruising along. We can increase our altitude to 2,500 feet once we exit the Class Bravo, and we hang out around Golden Gate Bridge, Alcatraz Island. When we're ready to come back home, we just tell NorCal, ready to come home, fly toward Oakland, get transitioned toward Oakland Tower, and then back to NorCal 125.35, hanging out near the mountainous area at 3,500 feet, remain clear of any obstacle in terrain, then coming back down to Reed Hillview 119.8. The alternative option is you can come up like what Chris was saying earlier, like that route, and then you can come back down via the coastline transition. You're talking with NorCal near the Golden Gate Bridge, 135.1, hanging around at 2,500 feet, now coming down along the coastline, descending 2,000 to get below Class Bravo airspace, going around that tiny little wedge at 1,600. Once you're clear, you can start climbing 3,500 feet as you're going toward the south bound. You're talking to NorCal 135.1 and then 135.65, and then you can cut across the mountain 3,500 feet toward Crystal Springs, and this is what it looks like. Crystal Springs is a long lake, and then coming back down south again. If you don't get Class Bravo transition, then you just cut across the mountain again from Crystal Spring outward toward Half-Moon Bay, going around the coastline. And now the secret word, number 2, is transitions. Transitions, when we ask for a secret word, that's what it is. So again, the way to get Wings credit is the tinyurl.com, Baytour Wings. We're going to ask for your name, your email address that you used to sign up for FAA Safety. The secret word was chocolate and transitions, and whether you'd like to join a listserv, and we'll send you handout any additional information. And at this time, we're going to open for questions. So if you have questions online or in person, feel free to ask.
Let's see if I can fit.
Was there questions?
Oh yeah. So one thing that I've been seeing a lot, kind of are going back and forth with a couple of the users inside is, if I'm in contact with NorCal, what airspaces can I actually transition through without having to talk to anyone? So to make it clear, as long as you are in contact with NorCal, you have established two-way radio communication, you can transition through any Delta or Charlie airspace without asking. If for whatever reason they need you to go somewhere else, or they want to know your intentions or route of flight, they will ask. Okay, we are a part of, as Cal was saying at the beginning, ATC and pilots are a team, and they don't know what we're doing sometimes, and we don't know what their logical thinking is sometimes, which is why we ask questions and so do they. Okay? You do not stress the other controllers out by transitioning through Charlie airspaces or Delta airspaces, because if they do not want you there, they'll tell you to get out. There has been multiple times when I've gone through Oakland And as I'm transitioning through Oakland, all of a sudden they'll tell me, hey, Skyhawk 12234, turn west heading 270, or they'll tell me east 290 to avoid the arrivals at Oakland. They'll most likely even tell you why they're telling you to do something. But you are not going to be stressing out controllers. You're not going to be causing an inconvenience. You're not going to be making anyone upset by following the rules. So if you're in contact with NorCal, NorCal is constantly updating and keeping other controllers in the area up to date on what you are doing. So you're, once again, to answer the question, you are not going to be upsetting anyone by transitioning through. Now, a second part of that question was, if I'm in contact with NorCal, am I allowed to just go into Bravo airspace? And the answer, without a doubt, is no. If you are talking to NorCal and you go into Bravo airspace without saying anything, you have now violated a regulation. Okay? It goes against the FARs. You must hear the magic words, Skyhawk 12234. You are cleared into the Bravo airspace. Okay? Most likely, you will also be given an altitude restriction, as well as a heading restriction, or in our case, it was a route that they gave us. So I hope that answers your question. There's some other questions in here as well that we're going to get to, and Tao has the chat up. It looks like she has another question she's about to answer.
Yep. All right, so the next question that we got is, can you show where Lake Chabot and all those fixes are? And then I'll show right here. The first one is the Mormon Temple. It's north of Oakland, and it's the edge of Place Charlie. The second one is Lake Chabot. It's east of Oakland Airport, and at the edge of Place Charlie. Next one is the Three Crosses right south of that, and Cal State south of that. Those are the 4 different locations that Oakland Tower might tell you to fly the route to. Does that answer your question, Jay?
Another question that popped up.
Okay.
Okay, so another question that I just read, and I told you we'd answer the question. So one of the things that was asked is referencing going over San Francisco and downtown San Francisco, and also being unfamiliar with some of these waypoints. To tackle the waypoint part of that question, I'm going to go ahead and let you know that if you are unfamiliar with ATC's instruction in any means, whether it be flying to a waypoint or flying to or a specific direction that they want you to go, the best thing that you, that at least I try to teach my students from very early on, is the magic word unfamiliar. Okay? By saying unfamiliar, they will go ahead and give you either vectors or a different way to go, by giving you a different waypoint or a different vector. For example, when I started working as a flight instructor, I had never done a bay tour through Oakland before. I had always gone up and used these transition routes, but my student wanted to go through Oakland. So I said, okay. And as we were coming back, they told me to go to Lake Chabot. Had no idea what it was. I literally just said those magic words, I'm unfamiliar. And they ended up giving me vectors to Lake Chabot and then asked me if I have the lake in sight. And I said I did, and now I know where Lake Chabot is. Okay? They have no problem helping you out. One of the things that we learned when talking to these controllers, if you don't know something, speak up and say it. Because it, as intimidating as radios can be, remember there is a human on the other side of that line that is wanting to help you instead of you acting like you know and then messing up. They rather you ask a million questions and get the correct way to go than you having a rough idea and assuming and then getting it wrong, and now all of a sudden they're stopping arrivals. And then for the question flying over San Francisco, that was like a 2-part question there. When it comes to flying over San Francisco, remember we have that rule. You want it within 2,000 feet of a horizontal distance, which is why I like to fly next to the city and not over it. And then, of course, when it comes to avoiding airspace, remember you are in contact with ATC. If you go into Class Charlie, you are okay to do so. Okay? It is okay to go through Class Charlie airspace while conducting your bay tour, unless you are told to remain clear. In all my years of doing bay tours, like I said, between Tal and I, we've probably done over 200 bay tours. I have never been told to stay out of class Charlie. So I hope that answers your question there. I'm going to give it back to Tal and look for more questions.
Okay. There was another question.
Someone had a question about flotation devices over the bay. You want to answer that one?
Yeah, there's a question about flotation device over the bay. Safety, fly high enough so you can always glide somewhere. And if you have flotation device, bring them. There are regulations, but what you want to think about is personal minimums. How safe do you want to be? When you're flying an aircraft, you want to think, would I feel comfortable if my wife, my kids, my husband, grandma was in the airplane with me? What is the safest way that I can fly this? So I would just fly high enough, knowing how far my aircraft could glide and stay close to the coastline. There was a question about the altitude and what they might give you along the coastline. They don't. If you're flying the coastline transition, usually it's own navigation. So you can fly whatever altitude you want, as long as you stay clear of class Bravo.
Phil had a question. He said, if you can cover, and I know you kind of mentioned it, if you can cover, if you were denied the transition on the way up to the peninsula out of San Carlos and you were boxed in, what is the best way to go? And I know you kind of mentioned it already, but if you want to just review it.
Sure. Phil, great question. So if you're coming up north, let's say from Reed View towards San Jose, and you're coming up to San Carlos, and you're asking for this transition, and they said, nope, stay out of class Bravo airspace, then you says, okay, no problem. I'm going to fly toward Crystal Spring, which is this lake here. I'm going to cut across the mountain and fly along the coastline. And then you just cut across the mountain, fly over Highway 92, and then fly up north via the coastline with all these altitudes, noting all these altitudes so you don't fly into Bravo. Now, let's say you're near San Carlos and they're like, nope, can't go into class Bravo. You just say, okay, I'm going to fly to Crystal Spring. I'm going to go along the coastline. So you're going to put in your GPS direct, enter Crystal Spring, VPCRY. Then you look for a Highway 92, cut across 3,500 feet, going up north now toward the Golden Gate Bridge. 3,500 feet, noting that the next airspace gets lower at 3,000 and then 2001. So you might come up at 2,000 feet. Once you pass that, you might increase your altitude 2,500 feet. And now you're hanging out around Golden Gate Bridge, Alcatraz. Does that answer your questions? That's what you would do if you can't get clear into class Bravo. There's another question, which part of the Bay Tour is the Bay Tour? And it's when you're flying toward Golden Gate Bridge, Alcatraz, right, Sausalito, Tiburon, when you're up north hanging around there, that's the Bay Tour. You can take off from San Carlos, Palo Alto, any other airport, Hayward as well. The route is pretty much what we've covered. We've covered from really down south, San Jose, Reed View, all the way up north. But if you're in any of the airports in the middle, the altitude, the frequencies are pretty much going to be very similar.
All right, so I see. Okay, so a common question that I've actually seen a couple times in this chat now is what is the difference between VFR transition routes and the VFR flyways on the backside of your terminal area chart? So the VFR flyways are going to be those blue squigglies that you're kind of seeing that blue plane kind of fly through. Those are going to be what we call VFR flyways, and they're essentially going to be backup routes that you can fly, keeping you out of airspace. And a VFR transition route is going to be a route ATC has predetermined and is going to give you, or you can request that specific route to get you through the Bravo airspace. So for example, when you request the Bayshore transition and they clear you by giving you that explicit clearance, once again, you gotta have the clearance in order to fly through them, okay? They know that you know the transition. For example, with those VFR transition routes, if you look on your terminal area chart, it will tell you Bayshore VFR transition route, ATC clearance is required, okay? Meaning you must talk to ATC before you actually fly these transition routes. And once again, those VFR flyways, you do not need ATC to assign you these. However, okay, there's a big however here. There are some that will take you through airspace and they will be labeled alternate ATC assigned, which you can actually see coming out of Oakland. But when it comes to those VFR flyways, as long as you follow the altitudes, they are going to keep you out of airspace and they're going to keep you out of trouble. So I hope that answers your question there. Now, one thing I'm going to kind of tackle, hopefully in a lump sum, is what if I'm not taking off out of Reed Hillview? How do I actually request the bay tour? Well, if you're taking off out of Oakland or San Carlos or Santa Rosa, Napa, for example, is another popular destination, Livermore. It doesn't matter what airport you're taking off of. If you want to be more specific on the bay, because I do know that we have another bay that's a little bit north of San Francisco Bay, you can you can literally request on the ground frequency, requesting taxi for the San Francisco Bay tour. Okay. In some airports, for example, when I've taken off out of Livermore to do a bay tour, they've asked me my route of flight or my planned route of flight, and all I've told them is transition through Oakland. And at that point, they literally just put it on there, and you can transition through Oakland. I've known some of my friends that they will transition up through around Oakland, and they'll say, "Oh, we're going to head up towards Napa and then over and down." Totally fine whichever way you do, but the initial contact is answering or requesting the San Francisco Bay tour at the very start of your flight. We learned from one of our traffic controllers that when you are conducting a tour, one of the ways they're keeping track of you is labeling you with the number 2 and then an E and an R. So 2 Echo Romeo is going to be hanging out under your airplane sign on their radar screen, indicating to all air traffic controllers knowing that you are conducting a tour of some kind. So I hope that answers your question when it comes to departing and conducting the tours from other airports. Okay, cool.
Awesome. One other question is, how long does this tour take?
An hour and a half.
An hour and a half. If you want to do the full circle and however much fuel and how fast your aircraft goes, right? An hour and a half in a Cessna 172 flying about 90 knots. That's how long flying in this big giant full circle will take you.
Someone followed up on this one.
Thanks, Srihar, about your suggestion distributing the handout early on. And about mounting GoPros, we actually did that. We have a video of our entire bay tour with the audios as well. So we'll process it and then we'll likely send it out as a link so you can watch the whole tour from our perspective.
So a follow-up question that someone asked about transitioning through different or taking off out of different airports is, if you're taking off of Oakland, is there any way to transition through across the bay over to Half Moon Bay to be able to follow up that coastline? And the answer is yes. While doing some of these tours out of Oakland and they have wanted to go over San Francisco Airport, there's a couple ways. One is requesting it over the ground, saying you want to go direct San Francisco Airport and then using the Bayshore transition to get you into San Francisco Bay. However, I've only been successful with that one time, and it was about 10 o'clock at night. So good luck getting that one. The most common way they're going to send you across the bridge, and someone kind of mentioned it earlier, is crossing mid-span over San Mateo Bridge. So you'll take off out of Oakland. Most likely, if you're taking off on the 2/8s, they're going to give you a downwind departure. They're going to give you a heading and tell you to cross over mid-span of the San Mateo Bridge. And then at that point, you will transition through San Carlos to Crystal Springs and then Half Moon Bay, or to San Carlos and then up north through the Bayshore transition. But the whole point before you do anything is to always request exactly what you want. talking to all these different controllers that Tal and I have gotten to kind of know pretty well over the last couple of weeks when preparing for this, we've learned that you are not going to bother them by asking questions, because the worst thing they're going to tell you is unable. Okay. And if you're at San Carlos, they'll say unable, say intentions, and then they're going to be really fast talking. But at the end of the day, requesting exactly what you want is going to be key into making your bait tour and overall flying experience a lot better in transitioning. And then James, I did see your question in there. Does ForeFlight give you all these different routes? And the answer is no. Once again, you got to use your VFR terminal area chart to see these VFR transition routes. All ForeFlight it is a very great tool, but ForeFlight will not give you the transition routes because they're already printed on your VFR sectional chart, or terminal area chart, which you should be using on ForeFlight anyway. So I hope that answers your question. Let me hand it back to Tao.
Are you familiar with monitoring 124.3?
Can you comment about monitoring 124.3, why outside B and C north of the city as opposed to talking to NorCal? My CFI, who used to fly police helicopters, tells us NorCal actually prefers you do that if you are not going to be entering B or C. So that is a great question, and I have not heard of monitoring a frequency like that before. Now, what I tend to do regardless is, even if I am not getting flight following and I am not going to be transitioning through airspaces, monitoring the controlling frequency or monitoring the controlling agency of the area you're flying is never a bad thing. There has been multiple times where I've been monitoring a frequency but haven't said anything to them. And I've heard them give traffic advisories. For example, Tal and I were actually flying back and forth from Sacramento yesterday, and I was monitoring. I was not on flight following, but I was monitoring the same frequency she was on. And they gave her our traffic alert, and they literally said the words, Skyhawk 90027 Hotel, traffic at your 12 o'clock, same altitude, advise left turn or right turn or whatever they said. And they said, he's not talking to me. Meaning that I didn't need to be talking to them, but I knew that was my traffic alert because I was also monitoring. Also monitoring a frequency is going to also help provide better separation for yourself and better situational awareness, especially when you're flying outside that mode C and ADS-B veil, because aircraft outside that circle are not required to have ADS-B out, meaning that even if you have ForeFlight, you may not see them on your iPad. And ATC is using classic radar to actually see them. So when it comes to monitoring frequencies, I've not heard of a specific frequency in specific areas. The only thing I can tell you is to monitor the frequency of the area that you are in. That is always going to be a green light in my book.
Awesome. One of the questions was on departure request. How do you select between tower to tower, Hanover, or NorCal? Defaults is you're hanging out with NorCal. And let's say and Chris mentioned this earlier, you're taking off from Reed Hillview, you're talking San Jose, crossing over Midview, and now San Jose Tower switch to NorCal 120.1. If you stay at 2,500 feet, you're going to be clear of Moffett, Palo Alto, San Carlos airspace. You're just hanging out with NorCal 120.1, then 135.65, and so on. The only time when you would want tower to tower is if you want lower altitude. If you're actually going to enter Palo Alto, San Carlos, maybe you're trying to land there, or you want to fly at a much lower altitude. Or if ATC tells you to switch frequency tower to tower, but that's very rare. Most of the time, you're just hanging out with NorCal, and I recommend staying high, 2,500 feet, clearing all those airspaces so that you're not in the way of their traffic pattern, and also giving you more terrain clearance and options in case you need to glide for landing. Other questions? If we haven't answered your questions, feel free to put it again because we have hundreds of chats that are going on at the moment.
I got one.
Okay.
John has asked a very great question. Can you give some general advice for engine out emergencies over the city or suburban areas? So Very great question. And I'm going to, instead of treating this as a seminar, I'm going to put on my little CFI hat and kind of do a little bit instructing here. When it comes to engine outs in general, my rule that I do with all my students is to always have a planned out. Okay? If you're one of my students, which I know some of my students are in here, we have some in the classroom, they get very annoyed with me sometimes because every probably 10, 15 minutes, I always ask, where are you gonna land? And if they take longer than about 5 or 6 seconds, I pull that power because I wanna see what they do, okay? And this is a very common teaching for me. So when you're over San Francisco City, okay, you are correct. You're very limited on where you're going. And we all know, especially if you fly the Cessna, which is incredibly top heavy, landing in the water is probably not the best, especially San Francisco Bay because it gets real cold. So where are you gonna go? So when I fly over San Francisco City, I'm at 2,500. That is going to, unless otherwise told by ATC, I usually do not get lower than that. In fact, I don't think I've ever really gotten lower than that before. 2,500 is going to provide adequate landing distance to make it either into Golden Gate Park, which has tons of landing sites, especially that ginormous field. That's going to be perfect for a small aircraft. You can also make it to the Presidio, which is going to have an awesome grass strip along the coast, which is once again a great landing site. Angel Island on the south side of the island, which you will be approaching, is also going to have a really great landing site on one of their hillsides. And better yet, it's even slightly paved. So it has slight of a road there, which is actually kind of cool. If you were to lose your engine directly over the city skyline, you have especially if you're at 2,500 feet, you have plenty of gliding distance, regardless if you're flying a Piper or a Cessna. I've done bay tours in both. You have plenty of gliding distance to make it to the Presidio. You also have plenty of gliding distance to make it either to the north side of Golden Gate Bridge or the south side, depending on where you're at. Now, one thing that I have gotten nervous for before is, flying over, it's like, what if you can't make the landing site, or what if you are too low? The best rule of thumb, last resort, is go for the water. Okay? Don't try to be a hero and try to land in the actual city. I promise it's not going to work. Rule of thumb, go for the water. If that is your last resort, landing in the water as close to the shoreline as possible is going to be the best bet in terms of picking a landing site. But as you're flying along, like I said, I always fly and I always have a place to land. I always like to joke around with my students. You can ask me at any portion of flight, regardless of what we're doing, and I have a landing site already picked out because I'm constantly updating them as we're going. So I hope that answers your question about if you're going to be flying over the city and you have an engine out, which would be kind of terrifying, but yeah. Definitely something that I have contemplated many times, which is why I pick the altitude I pick when flying over San Francisco Bay.
Do you want to answer a question? Your South Reno View request bay tour from NorCal?
Oh yeah, what's the question? If I'm en route from south of Reed Hillview, would I request the bay? So that's a great question, and the answer is yes. If you have not requested it already, taking off out of an untowered airport, for example, such as San Martin or Paso Robles, and you're wanting to do the San Francisco Bay Tour, you can request it with NorCal once you get on flight following. Or if you're transitioning through an airspace, you can also request it with the controlling agency of that airspace, such as Reed Hillview or San Jose, or even San Carlos if you've managed to snake your way all the way up there. Good luck. But when it comes to requesting the bay tour, if you're taking off out of an untowered airport, or maybe you took off and then decided last minute you want a bay tour, requesting with NorCal, absolutely, totally fine. They know exactly how to handle you, and they're going to get you on track. Okay, go ahead, Tal.
Peter, you asked, when I first contact NorCal from the north, with my intentions of hoping for Bravo transition, should I let them know my hopes on the initial call? I would say no, because you're kind of too far. My recommendation is you would ask for the transition when you're closer to San Carlos. when you're talking to actual controllers who have control over that airspace and who's interacting with San Francisco Tower. I'm just trying to find that image here. Here, when you are talking with NorCal 135.1 and when you're near San Carlos, approaching it from Palo Alto to San Carlos, that's when I would request the Bravo transition. If you do it too early, it's too much in advance and they're not even the controlling agency in that area. So just wait to talk NorCal 135.1. In a similar way, let's say I'm coming back from Half Moon Bay. And I want to transition over Class Charlie across Midview. Across Midview over San Jose Tower. What I did was I asked early in advance, can I cross over San Jose Tower? Here we go. Okay. So if I'm in a similar way, so if I'm coming from Half Moon Bay and trying to cross over San Jose Tower to come and land at Reed Hillview, I try to ask early in advance, and then the controller is like, okay, but it doesn't actually do anything. Usually you have to wait until you're closer to where you want to transition, maybe talk to NorCal 120.1 before you ask, hey, can I fly over Midview across San Jose Tower before landing at Reed Hillview? I think earlier there was a question is, what if we want to avoid crossing Charlie into San Jose and doing a giant loop down to Gilroy, coming back up to Reed Hillview? You can totally do that. That's safe. I've done that before as well. It's just a longer flight. But if for you that's a sightseeing and those views are beautiful, go for it. You can fly around the Class Charlie and come around and land at Reed Hillview. That's totally fine as well.
I don't know. He's asked this question twice, and I'm just remembering it here.
Yeah.
So the flyway chart shows to monitor 124.3 below 2,000 feet. Do you know about that frequency and who monitors it?
I've never used that frequency 124.3. I would always be talking with NorCal 135.1. But if you want to monitor that frequencies, you can. The reason why I usually don't is because they're talking so much already on 135.1 that I'm paying attention and listening to see if they're going to talk to me. And I usually don't have enough bandwidth to be monitoring another frequency. But if it's quiet and you want to monitor that, that's fine. We've never had to talk to them. At least I've never talked to anyone on 124.3.
There was one that I'm going to answer just because it's
Go
fun. So you guys have, a couple of you have actually mentioned San Carlos, and one of you guys said, is San Carlos really that annoying? So the reason that I kind of joke around about San Carlos is because I did my initial private pilot training out of San Carlos. And it is a very intimidating airport because it sits right up against the Class Bravo, and it also sits right underneath the Class Bravo. And so when I say that San Carlos is very no nonsense and fast talking, I like to joke around that they're an extension of San Francisco because they really are fast talking and no nonsense. Before I solo any student, the first place that I'm taking them is San Carlos. And my rule is if you can get me in and out of San Carlos, avoiding airspace, landing, taking off, back to Reed Hillview, you are more than ready to solo in San Francisco. Which is why I do it that way, because once again, they're incredibly no nonsense there. They have some really great controllers, okay? Don't get me wrong, I'm not bashing any of the controllers. I am mainly just mentioning that they are very, like I said, no nonsense, and they want to make sure that you know exactly what you're doing because they will definitely kick you out of their airspace. I've seen it happen. I've personally been kicked out when I've been trying to teach a student something, and they literally say, get out of my airspace. Because they do not want to deal with you, especially because they also have 135 traffic that is coming in and out of San Carlos. They have a couple jets that are flying in and out on that tiny little runway, which still blows my mind a little bit. but they also have a lot of IFR departures coming out of there as well. It is very busy up against San Francisco. And like I said, they're very no nonsense. And that's why I kind of give them a little grief every now and again. But yes, I try to avoid talking to San Carlos when I do these bay tours, if at all possible. I just rather make it easier on myself and talk directly to NorCal.
One of the other questions that we had was, could you just do it in the blind and not have flight following, do this bay tour? My recommendation is don't do that. Okay, beyond flight following, because it's extremely helpful. The airspaces get very complex, and there are lots of aircraft flying around, airliners, jets, little baby airplanes. And you want the controllers to help navigate you. And when we talk to controllers, they tell us something that's very interesting. Anytime the two aircrafts are close to each other and there's a certain distance and altitude, it sends out a signal on their radar. It's audio and it's visual. So it sends out an oral signal. And that's how they know to alert you to vector for traffic. Now, you want that, especially when you're flying in a busy airspace. You want the controllers to help vector you around. But it also means that when you're in flight following, you have to be careful listening to if they're going to give you a certain heading or altitude so that they can help navigate you and vector you around. Also, it's extremely helpful in case you are getting close to an airspace that you're not supposed to be in. They will warn you. For example, when we're flying along the coastline, if you ever get close to this little wedge that I told you about, like avoid this wedge below 1,600 feet, if you're 2,000 feet and you're getting close to that wedge, they'll chime in, they'll say, hey, watch out for that airspace because you're about to enter it. So the controllers will help you navigate around the airspaces as well if you're getting dangerously close to where you're not supposed to. That's why we recommend doing flight following, especially on a more complex airspace like this.
Do the bay short transition routes follow VFR corridors? This would be a great way to explain the difference between those.
Yeah. So there are 3 ways to transition through Class Bravo. The first way is VFR transition, which is what we've been talking about, indicated by these magenta lines. You have to have ATC clearance, and they usually give you an altitude restriction. The second way is the flyway, which are all these blue. VFR flyways allows you to avoid Class Bravo. So do you see here, the Class Bravo shelf is 3,000 feet. The blue, the flyways, says fly below 3,000 feet. Then you're going to duck underneath the Bravo airspace. VFR corridors are not available in San Francisco area, but they are in LA area. And that's where we like to train our students. And they're not called VFR corridor down there. They call Los Angeles Special Flight Rules. The corridor is a little tunnel that you can punch right through Class Bravo airspace and not be talking to ATC at all. You're just talking pilot to pilot. It's almost like you're in non-controlled airspace. So VFR corridor, not available in San Francisco. You're either going to do the transition route, ask ATC. There's only 3 names, right? There's either Pacifica, Coastline, or the Bayshore. You're going to get an altitude restriction, or you try to duck below Class Bravo shelves using these blue VFR flyways. Michael says, other advantage of having flight following, if you ever have an emergency, yes, you're already talking to the best resource to get help. Awesome. Yeah, ATC, like I said, is your friend. It's a dance that we do. They want to keep you safe. They want to get everyone home. They want everyone to have a good time. It's a dance, and really use them as that, right? That 1600 Bravo is quite hidden. I almost entered. It was not for NorCal alerting. Yes, yeah, that's really tight and tiny, but that's why I caution you. You actually have to go out along the coastline a little bit and come back in. Eric, you can do the bay tour without talking to ATC. You just have to avoid Bravo, Charlie, Delta. And it is advisable to talk to ATC, extra eyes. Yes, yeah, you could do the bay tour without talking, definitely. But we advise that you talk just because now you have lots of resources. You have a team member that's looking out for you. I think that's awesome.
One thing.
Go ahead. And earlier people were asking, do we offer bay tours or do we come in other people's aircraft to help you navigate around the bay tour? The answer is yes. Yeah, that's what we do as flight instructors. So if you ever want to go on a bay tour, you can rent an aircraft out of Aerodynamic, or we can hop in your aircraft and help you navigate the bay tour. I usually recommend that you go with someone who knows what they're doing the first time, just so that when you're by yourself, it's not so crazy overwhelming. But hopefully throughout this presentation, you understand the radio communications, you understand the airspaces and the frequency, and gives you a heads up.
So one question that I kind of got that I kind of wanted to go ahead and just a little bit clarifying is when you talk to NorCal, if you are coming from an airport that is either non-towered or you decide at last minute, I want to do a bay tour, and you call up a NorCal frequency, is it advisable to tell them what transition route you want on initial contact? And my advice is yes. And the reason for it is because even though they may not be able to fulfill your request right away, they have the ability, if they're not too busy, to either let the next controller know, or they're going to say the magic words, which I've gotten plenty, give your request to the next controller. Or they'll say something along the lines of, you can request that once you're farther north or farther south. But it never hurts to let them know your full intentions once you've gotten their attention. Now, that's not to say when you call up NorCal to say, NorCal, Skyhawk 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, we're wanting a bay tour with bay short transition, and they're trying to get other aircraft, right? I usually always say when you are calling up NorCal as a cold call for the first time, just say those magic words, NorCal 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, and leave it at that. Some people say, say the magic words with a request. I usually say avoid that, because when you're calling as a cold call, they know you have a request and it's just taking up airtime. So you can literally just say NorCal, Skyhawk 1, 2, 2, 3, 4. They'll get back to you when they're ready. And they'll usually come back with 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, go ahead, or 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, say request. In some instances, they've already known what I wanted to do, and they're so busy, they'll just say, Sky 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, fly heading 270, cleared into Class Bravo airspace, follow 101. Because they already have an idea of what you're trying to ask for, depending on where you're at. And if they give you something weird, don't be hesitate to tell them it's like, hey, that's not what I want, or unable, I'm trying to do this. So that way you can go ahead and make your intentions clear. But on initial contact, it is never a bad thing to let them know what you actually want to do, because it makes their lives and the future controllers' lives that you will be talking to in that flight a lot easier. Plus, it's less stressful for you trying to figure out, all right, when should I request this bay tour? Or when should I tell ATC that I want to do it? As soon as possible, my friend. Get that request in there, and they'll tell you what they need you to do after that initial request. And then once again, to talk about ForeFlight, everyone kind of looks at ForeFlight as this magical application, and we forget that ForeFlight is using the FAA's terminal area charts. People have asked a couple times in the chat, does ForeFlight tell you the altitudes and the airspaces? Absolutely, because it's using the terminal area chart. All it is a glorified digital chart. Okay. Now, ForeFlight does provide a little bit of extra features to help you identify some of these things, but your VFR chart is going to be 100% the best way to go in finding the correct altitude and finding the correct transition route. So I hope that answers the questions involving ForeFlight, and I hope that answers the questions on the initial contact to NorCal. Is there anything else in there? All right, go ahead.
Yeah, so there's a question. Oh, I just want to add that when you're talking on these radio calls, that NorCal is very busy. The conversation we've had with them is they're very short staffed as well, and they're moving a lot of aircrafts around. One of the controllers said he has 700 aircrafts happening on his screen at one time. What that means is any time that they're talking to you, they're expecting you to repeat and answer them almost instantaneously. You don't want to have that delay, because they're waiting for you to answer. If you're not answering, they have to move on to the next person. And it's better to have a closed loop conversation. So just be ready anytime that they're talking to you. answer immediately. Anu asked earlier that when you're changing frequencies, do you need to repeat that you're on a bay tour? The answer is no. Initially, when you ask, I would like to request a bay tour, they enter information about your aircraft, your destination, and what you're doing on that flight. And like Chris was saying earlier, 2ER is what they'll enter, and that signifies that you're in a bay tour. So anytime that you're changing controllers, all you have to say is your altitude. And the reason is because they want to make sure that you have the right altimeter setting and they're reading the same altitude that they're reading, and everyone is on the same page. But your actual destination and where you're going, they already know. And as part of the system, it follows you in a little box in your little icon aircraft across their brain.
All righty. So I just saw the question, when is the best time to do a touch and go in San Francisco Airport? The reason that I wanted to answer this question is because I have actually done a touch and go at San Francisco. And if you look for it, it is on YouTube. The problem is that they actually are not allowing this anymore. What ended up happening was I literally was coming back from Chico. I did a bay short transition, not for the bay tour, but just to get back into San Carlos, where I was actually departed from. And I literally just asked them in the height of the pandemic. I said, "Hey, when's a good time to do a touch and go?" And they literally said, "Go ahead right now." And they gave me, they told me to enter in I believe it was a right downwind. Did my touch and go, and then he said, "All right, get out," and pretty much kicked me out. So the only problem is that the controller that cleared me, I have gotten to know him pretty well over the last year and a half, and they are not allowing touch and goes. Now, if you want to land at San Francisco, you are completely allowed to do so. My advice is to do it about 1 or 2 in the morning and be prepared to pay that amazing $350 landing fee, okay? Because you will not weasel your way out of that one, okay? If you want to do that in the middle of the day, you are just like every other airplane. However, IFR arrivals have priority, meaning if they're scheduled to arrive and they are on an IFR flight plan, they are going to be sequenced before you, okay? Eventually, they'll find a gap and they'll clear you to land, and then you'll taxi over to signature, where you will, like, once again, pay that really expensive landing fee, okay? So if you want to do a touch and go, as far as my knowledge, just talking to them a couple of weeks ago, they're still not allowing just random touch and goes at SFO. But I wanted to throw my 2 cents in there about the touch and go, just because, like I said, I've gotten the opportunity to do it. But yeah, absolutely. Tom, I'm going to hand it back to you. I'm going to go back to my questions.
Okay, one of the questions, what's the best day and time to do a bay tour? The answer is when the weather is the best. The first thing you always look for is how's the weather looking. You're really cautious. You want to be cautious about the marine layers and the clouds layer, because one, if there are clouds, that's going to cover everything, and then you're just flying over white. That's not as exciting as being able to see the cityscape line. Also looking for haze, any clouds, turbulence, that's going to make it uncomfortable flight as well. Usually I would think weekdays are a little bit less busy than weekends. We have weekend warriors, we have lots of tours that are happening on the weekend. Everyone wants to come and check out the Golden Gate Bridge and Alcatraz. So if you can do it on the weekdays when everyone else is working, that's usually a good time. Another thing that you might want to think about is when the airliners are coming in, landing or taking off. So when you have United, Southwest, American Airlines doing all their flights at San Francisco, you want to avoid those times as well. So priority is weather, number one. And then weekdays is usually better than weekends. And then if you know the airline schedule, right, and then you can fly outside those times, that will probably allow you to definitely get through cross-border transition.
Jean asked if they're busy and we want to be responsible aviation citizens, should we stay out of Bravo, Charlie, and Delta if we can?
We should have fun as well.
Great answer.
They don't mind. They're really, when we talk to our American friends, they're like, yeah, we love having pilots coming, flying the Bay Tour, that's fine. You know, if you want to see a certain thing, just ask for what you want. You know, if they can accommodate it, they will definitely do that. If they can't, they'll just say enable and give you another direction or heading. So it's not your job to protect them and avoid and make their lives easier. You're dancing with them, you're coordinating, and they're very welcoming to pilots. They love it. For example, these controllers that we talk to, they're super busy, but they chat and they talk with us on the phone for an hour or 2 hours because they love the fact that we're reaching out to pilots and we're talking with you and engaging you. I want you to think of ATC as part of your team member. Just bring them along. Hey, come along. The other thing that they also mentioned is most ATC specialists are not pilots. They're sitting in a room with a radar screen. And if you are flying around and you see a mountain, you see the clouds, something weird happens, you can tell them just in plain English what you want because they're not pilots. They don't see the clouds. They don't see the mountains coming up. So just let them know. Treat them as a team. Don't worry and trip yourself up over phraseology. If plain English, it would work just fine.
There was one that
So a question that I just read was, can you fly an experimental aircraft on the Beitor? Yes, as long as the aircraft meets those requirements for the Mode C ADS-B veil that hangs around San Francisco Bay. For example, in order to actually go through Bravo airspace, one of the rules is that you must have ADS-B out. You also need to have a Mode C transponder and be able to communicate with two-way radio communication. Okay? And this is the same for Class Charlie and any airport inside that Mode C ADS-B veil. So even if your aircraft is experimental, a light sport, as long as you are, especially I'm talking to the sport pilots here, as long as you have the endorsements to fly through those airspaces, absolutely, as long as your aircraft and you meet those requirements. So can you fly an experimental on the Beitor? Absolutely, as long as it meets those equipment requirements. And you're, of course, talking to a radio to do these transitions.
The follow-up with the question was, can you as flight instructors fly the tour and experimental?
Oh, yes, absolutely. We can. So as a flight instructor, we are, it's quite funny, we're actually qualified to fly or teach in anything aircraft single engine. It doesn't even say single engine land on our instructor certificates, which is kind of ironic. But we need to have the qualifications for it. So for example, I do not fly tailwheel. I don't have any interest, but Tao likes tailwheel. And if your experimental happens to be tailwheel, then yes, she could theoretically instruct you in that airplane if she felt comfortable enough to instruct you in it. If it's not tailwheel, like I said, I'm your guy at that point. I would more than happy willing to fly with you, and same with Tao. Just because it's experimental doesn't mean we cannot give flight instruction as long as the aircraft meets the requirements.
Maria asks, is there an ATC number for general public where we can ask questions? There is a way you can interact with ATC, which is Facebook. There's Facebook group. The one specifically for Reed Hillview is Reed Hillview Aviation Friends, RHV Aviation Friends. That's monitored by Lauren, who is our controller. Let's say you have questions about what should I say, what should I do at Reed Hillview. You would join that Facebook group, post a question, Lauren or someone else will answer it for you. If you want to talk to other ATC controllers outside Reed Hillview, you would join a Facebook group, The Landline, and that's where you're going to find lots of different ATC controllers. A lot are from Florida, but some are in California and other countries as well. So that's how you can interact directly with ATC.
I'm not seeing any other questions come up.
Oh,
No.
Any last minute questions? We have 5 minutes. 5 minutes left. And go ahead and put it in. Neil will share with us the camera for the Golden Gate Bridge. You can always check the webcam to see what the weather is going to be like.
Reed will be getting a lot of pressure to close. I don't know if you want to address any of that.
Middle, first word is chocolate, last word is transitions. Reed Hillview, we're using
Staying
unleaded,
open.
unleaded 94. We're staying open. The FAA is supporting us, and so we're just watching how that plays out. But we're fingers crossed. We're still open. Awesome. So like I said earlier, if you want a wing seminar, if you want a handout, if you want to stay in contact with us, the best way to do that is to go to that tiny URL, Baytour Wings, and then you can put any comments, any questions, request the wings seminar there. Yep. What's it?
Can you do another tour like Napa or other landmarks?
Yeah.
Question I asked.
Absolutely. Yeah. Will you be sending out links to the webcam you use for checking conditions? Oh, we can gather that and send it to you. Yes. So Jess found a SFO touch and go. Where can we access the recording? We filled out your tiny URL link, and there's a box where you can put comments if you want the recording, if you want anything specific, put in that box, and then that's how we'll reach out to you. Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for attending. I love all your interactive chatting. That's been a lot of fun for us, and we love being here with you. And we hope to see you next time in our next event. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, guys. That was awesome.
Absolutely.